Everyone loves bloopers. No, not those little squiddly bastards from Super Mario. Those guys can get in the sea. Actually, they already live there, so they can get out of it and then get back in the sea, you little tentacle time wasters. We're talking about honest-to-goodness cock-ups, mind farts, and whatever Nia Jax was doing here. Was she possessed, or did the tiny rat that lives inside her hair and controls her have another tantrum because it wants to make haute cuisine? We will never know. Sometimes in wrestling, these mistakes are called botches, and they're pretty popular with fans with the schadenfreudic streak. And because it's the close of 2020 and we're all in need of a good laugh, thanks to the absolute dog's arse of a year we've all been treated to, it has never been more important than now to gather up the embarrassing bloopers that actually aired on WWE TV this year. It's basically a public service. Rey Mysterio is one of the greatest wrestlers on the planet. Except when he's not. To be honest though, this one isn't really Rey's fault, but I wanted to come up with a fun opening line so I am sure he'll understand. On the January 27th episode of Raw, which was my birthday, happy birthday me, what a year I've been treated to, f*** you birthday, Rey took on a returning MVP who had rejoined WWE the night before in the Royal Rumble. The finish of the match, as it often is, was supposed to be your classic 619. You know the one, spin through the ropes, bop them in the face with your size 3 Ray shoes, but MVP sort of stood up before this could happen. Realising he was doing something wrong, he then took the move to the small of his back instead of his face. Thankfully, Rey, knowing no one would buy this as a devastating manoeuvre because we've all seen massages with more foot-to-back action than that, decided to hit a splash onto MVP's back to capitalise on the weakness he'd just caused, and he scored the pin. Good save, Rey. If you remember last year's WWE Hall of Fame ceremony, which happened in the year 1600 as far as I'm concerned, you'll remember that a quote-unquote fan decided it would be a good idea to rush the ring and attack Bret Hart, earning himself a knuckle sandwich courtesy of Dash Wilder. No flips, just fists in ya mush. It's probably no wonder then that WWE are very wary of potential ring invaders. Too wary. Because on the January 6th episode of Raw, the security team did exactly the right thing when a man they didn't recognise rushed the ring, immediately tackling him to the ground before dragging him out of the ring. Unfortunately, that man was actually an actor who was playing the pastor in Bobby Lashley and Lana's wedding. After introducing the man of the cloth to the mat, security did eventually allow him back into the ring, where he continued to conduct the ceremony, a little more dishevelled than before, and amazingly, it wasn't the worst ring invasion during that particular ceremony. Lesbians. WrestleMania! Shouted Montez forward before running towards the ropes and performing a beautiful suicide dive on the March 30th edition of Raw. The only problem was that Austin Theory seemed to have forgotten that he was supposed to be standing in the way, so Ford was no longer flying, he was falling with style. A feat that likely broke the WWE high dive and long dive records and at least a couple of vertebrae, as the very loud crunch of his back clacking on the ramp would suggest. Thankfully, the damage to Ford was minimal, and while Theory went on to appear at WrestleMania in a match against the Street Profits, he was very quickly moved back to NXT, where hopefully he's learned how to concentrate on the match more. He needs more Ford focus. Jokes, that's and jokes. It's fair to say that WWE's introduction of the Thunderdome has brought much needed life back to what has been a very strange, very empty feeling year for wrestling. The lack of fans in the arena was really starting to affect the home viewing experience, so the idea to stream an audience live into the venue was a genuinely brilliant one. Instant atmosphere. Unfortunately, the madness of crowds also applies to really fancy Zoom calls, and some people took it upon themselves to make a mockery of the entire thing. While I won't go into the full list of the atrocities we've seen, we have seen images of Chris Benoit and of the KKK being shown on screens, as it is clearly much harder for WWE to control what dickheads can show from the comfort of their own home. It's not all bad though, because there has been someone who keeps showing a Pikachu plushie. Maybe that's why they call it the Thunderdome. It's definitely not because of these zingers. It's been a really long year, leave me alone. You may have noticed that chaos backstage in WWE has been a pretty common headline on WrestleTalk, and that is because, and you won't believe this, there's been quite a lot of chaos backstage in WWE this year. This point was proven on the September 14th episode of Raw during a segment featuring Raw Tag Champs the Street Profits and the then SmackDown Tag Team Champions Cesaro and Nakamura. Now, the Street Profits' catchphrase, as we all know, is "We want the smoke." I don't know what it means, but I know it's "We want the smoke." And whether this was simply a case of Shinsuke botching the line or some poor taste choice in his script, he said in response to it, if they want the smoke, they will get cancer. Now, I don't really think I have to go into why this line was deemed inappropriate, especially as it wasn't all that long after Roman Reigns returned to the company having undergone treatment for leukemia, but yeah, not a great look. According to reports which came out after the show, it seemed the line was supposed to be removed from the taping, but an unfortunate video editor happened to forget. Our editors would never leave lines in that weren't supposed to be there, would you, James? You'd never make that mistake, would you? Good. Can't believe Ollie's making us do these stupid Christmas lists. And speaking of inappropriate, here's Charlie Caruso with the biggest Freudian slip since Sigmund went ice skating. Because during an episode of Raw Talk featuring R-Truth, Charlie thought it would be fun to list off Truth's accomplishments, which included the ludicrous amount of times he's been the 24/7 champion. Now, if you watch Raw, you'll know that Truth sometimes also calls himself the 7-Eleven champion, because comedy. So Charlie no doubt just wanted a bit of that action. However, what came out of her mouth instead was the 9/11 champion. Yeah, it's probably best to avoid that one going forwards, Charlie. It's Raw Talk again. What a silly little show that is with its accidental disaster mentioning. Thankfully, this blooper is far more tame, but still involved Charlie Caruso, even if she wasn't responsible for this said blooper. The August 31st guests were MVP Shelton Benjamin and Lashley of the Hurt Business, and when it came to Lashley's turn to speak, he just sort of forgot how to human and began speaking nowhere near his microphone for several seconds before Charlie was forced to intervene and ask Bobby to please talk into the actual microphone. Bobby, please mate, please, it'll make all of our jobs so much easier. This moment was obviously made better by MVP, clearly corpsing behind his hand while doing his best to remain in character. Now this one is just plain weird. As you may have noticed, there has been a global pandemic this year, and it's had plenty of effect on the wrestling business on the whole. And one such issue that arose was that Wade Barrett and Beth Phoenix were unable to attend NXT TakeOver 31 in person, and instead commentated from their homes. To combat this, WWE made the unusual decision to have human stand-ins sit at the commentary desk, as if people watching at home might lose their minds at the sight of the commentary desk sat empty. Where are the voices coming from, they're going to say? Is this a curse? Is this like Beauty and the Beast? Do we have until the final petal falls to convince Mandy Rose to make out with Otis, who will all remain this way forever? What do you mean that already happened? You've got to be shitting me. As if years of playing the WWE SmackDown games on the PS1 hadn't prepped us for this very eventuality. And yes, while it is a weird decision in the first place, the people they chose made it even more bizarre. Because Beth Phoenix is well known for having long blonde hair, and so naturally, WWE chose someone with long, purpley red hair to sit at the desk and pretend to be her, as if they couldn't find another blonde. I mean, it's WWE, Vince loves blondes. So naturally, this was noticed by pretty much every single person watching and commented on by pretty much every single person watching, and naturally, all of those people were confused. Now you might have noticed that during the first half of this year that the New Day's Big E would often throw his coat out of the ring after making his entrance, and often at commentator Corey Graves, no doubt because of some in-joke between the two men. However, at Money in the Bank, Big E put a bit of extra sauce on the throw, caning Corey in the cranium and knocking him out of his chair, and his headset fell to the floor. Everyone in the ring thought it was hilarious. Michael Cole barely recovered, but Big E has since revealed that one man who didn't think it was funny was Vince McMahon, who was most displeased. Laughter is a weakness after all. Bless Byron Saxton. Not only has he been lumped with a third commentary seat for most of his WWE career, only 2 away from the play-by-play, keep at it Byron, but he also got lumped with a kick in the nads on TV this year. On the March 16th episode of Raw, Stone Cold rattled Byron's snake, gross, with a swift boot during an interview segment. Byron, rather blithely, clearly never having seen a Stone Cold interview, didn't anticipate the stunner. Or maybe he did and Austin's aim was off, or maybe it was right on, maybe Austin was going for his nads. Because instead of receiving a gut kick to double him over, Steve buried his boot right in Byron's jewels. And to add insult to injury, a beer can later thrown into the ring for Austin to catch went wonky and caught Saxton right in the eye. Never meet your heroes. So there you go, 10 bloopers that actually aired on WWE TV this year. If you like the list, please give us a like and leave a comment down below letting us know your favourite WWE blooper of all time, and click the videos that have appeared on screen to watch more awesome WrestleTalk end of year wrap up lists.